Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to see a large attendance for this topic, which in our view is not sufficiently mainstreamed in ADB's operations in general. So it's it's very nice to see a large crowd of people coming to hear about today's topic, which is non-motorized transport. Over the last days, you've probably heard about a very large infrastructure project, metros, BRTs, highways, roads. But I think we should always keep something in mind. All those modes are not representing the majority of mobility in urban cities most of the time in developing countries. The mode which has the majority most of the time is still walking. People still walk a lot in the cities where we where we intervene. So I see that there's good supporters over there. So that's very good. From within ADB, oh, that's very good. Perfect. So that's what we'll be discussing today. Today's session is really structured around this particular topic of non-motorized transport. Anything which doesn't have an engine, basically. We will ask ourselves three main questions. How can non-motorized transport systematically scale through policy planning and project design in our operations? Why integration of that particular mode with mass transit is critical to maximize its impact? And what makes non-motorized transport projects successful, inclusive, and replicable in Asian urban context? So that will be really the three main questions for today's session. I will call on stage the four first speakers for this afternoon. So Purnima, Aglaé, Bram, and Chris, if you can sit down on stage. Very good. So we will start today's presentations with Madame Aglaé de Gros. Aglaé is a professor and head of the Institute of Urbanism of Graz University of Technology in Austria. Aglaé, please.
Yes, thank you a lot for this invitation. I will present you some of the work. I'm a bit too far. Yes, here. That will be published in my next book. And you will understand, and I'm really pleased that I'm in a group of activists. You will understand that I will try to explain you how to integrate the different mode of transport and how to prioritize non-motorized transport. I don't use normally non-motorized because it's a kind of negation or reaction against something. I prefer to use active mobility because I think it proves that you are moving, that you are thinking, that you are breathing. And of course, at the moment, it's a very useful mode of transport because it doesn't use fuel and it's also very healthy. Here you see in this slide, maybe, and you see the white frame that highlighted. It's how we can design the profile of the street to integrate the active mobility. In this case, you see that the street is not 3 meters of asphalt as required for the car, but it has cobblestone in the middle. That means that it's extremely uncomfortable to drive on it because you will have one wheel on the cobblestone and one wheel on the asphalt. And that's the way in design, it's a very simple way, we can prioritize the bicycle and the pedestrian. You see, it's not really high technology, it's very simple, but it's quite effective. I would like to present you an example of this in Leuven in Belgium. I will make you travel a bit through Europe now. And you see how it transformed then the space which was previously totally dedicated to cars into a space which is dedicated to bicycle, pedestrian, but also green. It's very much integrated. You see the before and after, and what you can see in those, I don't know if the pointer works, no, maybe not, but nevertheless, you see in those diagrams how much space is reclaimed for the active mobility, as it is now in white in the second diagram, yes? It looks like that. It's very integrated. And that's a bit of a strange slide, but it represents the process. That means that I think it's really important. We had yesterday the talk that maybe this change in mobility can be carried by a very strong authorities. I would like to contradict that a bit and just explain in a quite of a dialogue with the inhabitant how this process and transformation can happen. You see in this slide, it's a bit complex, but what is important to know is that there are external elements that influence this integration. And you can read through this different arrow that one of the events, which is strangely was a big problem, it was because of course you have, if you integrate the green, you have to buy more land. It was a problem to buy this land. It was owned by the railway company in this case. And the one part, the railway company was, we were dealing with one part of the railway company that did agree to sell the land, and another part was already renting it to somebody else. It was a bit of a delay, of course, in the process, but nevertheless, this delay we use not as a problem, but as a chance to take the time, because of course the delay was something like 2 years. we took the time to talk with the inhabitant, and that's the result in design of this discussion with the inhabitant, because some of the inhabitants along this street, they were a bit afraid of all those bicycles passing through, and they would require a wall to protect the garden that some of them had along. And then we discussed with them, and at the point, as we had the time, some of them, they did want to have this wall to protect them. Some of them, and here it's the example that you can see, some of them, they ask for a door then. And I think that is what is important while trying to integrate the different mobility, is to not see the problem as a kind of stop in the process, but just as a matter of delay. I will go a bit further and explain you that this project was the first bicycle street in Belgium. That means that after that, the region used this pilot as a norm. And I think that's the next step. I think that is really important, is to learn from the project we did and try to use them as a norm. That's the way now it is described in the guideline for design of a bicycle street. And now that's Austria. I tell you, I will make you travel a bit in Europe. And now, as it is a norm, it can be replicated, and it can be also replicated in other European countries. Like here, in a bit of a cheaper version of it, but still you see that even if there are not a cobblestone, you can see that the green and the trees, they are integrated in the design. Well, with the university, we analyze 20 of those projects of transformation, and we draw some general conclusion, and I would like to use that as my conclusion, that an external event can really help to make the people working together, because you have to make the planners, the landscaper, and all of them working together, yes? That a delay in the process, as I mentioned, can be used to more dig within the context that is around the project. And what we learn also, analyzing all those examples, that you have opposition, and often when it's really a political opposition, it remains the whole process. And that means maybe there is a small amount of opposition we just don't have to take in account. That's it. Thank you.
So thank you very much to Aglaé for this presentation of the status of an innovation of a non-motorized transport infrastructure and infrastructure design in Europe. So big round of applause for our speaker. We will now welcome Ms. Purnima Singh. Purnima is Manager, Research and Membership Services at the International Association of Public Transport, UITP, for Asia and Pacific, where she leads strategic research initiatives, regional partnerships, and knowledge-sharing platforms, advancing sustainable urban mobility across the Asia-Pacific region. So I think she will have a presentation on advancing active mobility for inclusive and sustainable cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining in this large group, that too for this topic, which we need to actually think about it with this paradigm right now, the crisis we are going through. So I'm very much privileged to attend this stage second time, and I'm thankful for ADB to calling me and join this platform to speak very enthusiastically about non-motorized transport, or also promoting the sustainable mode of public transport. I have been working throughout these years. I'm basically urban planner and enthusiastic transport planner as well. I use public transport all the time where I live in Singapore. And Singapore is a great example of how we can use public transport and make people walk and ride. So I will start my presentation with sharing a lot of broader view, what are members, that real case studies, and walk you through the Asia Pacific, like Aglaé has walked you through the European cities. I will bring the more context to the Asia Pacific, because our challenges in Asia Pacific is slightly different than the European context, though we can take the inspiration from there. But I will take you how we can move from just to a thinking about policy to how can bring this into practice and how the cities have been doing this. So thank you, and I will start my thought with this idea of Asia is world's second largest after Africa to urbanize faster. Right now we are urbanizing with the rate of 56 to 60% urbanization rate, and it is projected around by 2050 we will be urbanizing by, the urban population will be around 65%. So imagine the kind of pressure it will put on the public transport, on our environment and our overall government, how people will move. It will create more chaos. So in that case, we need to think, because these kinds of pressure, more car ownership is creating more environmental pollution. As per data, we understand the WHO data of 2024, it says that more than 2 million people, they lose their life every year because of the chronic pollution. Delhi is an example of it. Every winter you cannot breathe. China was an example of that, but they have started improving their air quality through the electric mobility or through the implementation of the policies, formulations. We lose our life in the road safety. A lot of accidents we hear. I see in Philippines, I was stuck in public transport, like on the road for 1 hour just to cover my 20-minute distance, and I dropped that idea of using the car and walk by. So we can imagine why we need to think about active mobility. as Agle said, non-motorized transport. We say it's non-motorized, a kind of different idea. So I will also talk in terms of the active mobility because I'm an active person. I do run, I do walk. So I will talk in that sense. And that we need to do, what we need to do in this case is we have a two option. First, we create more space for road to give more wider uh, road width to reduce the congestion, bring more cars or more public transport, build BRT system, or we have another option of changing the paradigm, changing our thinking from the people to the government by giving the priority to these active mobility modes where we walk, we enjoy the space. We realize that there is a safe space for us to walk. We don't have to go for indiscriminate, like indiscriminate behavior of here you can walk, here you cannot walk. There should be a connectivity. So I will talk in that sense. But what is this non-motorized transport? We always think only cycling, but walking is 40% of that, where this first and last mile connectivity we cover by walk. When we catch our bus to go to office, when we drop our children to the school bus, when we need to go for the grocery shopping, we walk. So walking is an integral part of it, and it is a part of non-motorized transport. It is a part of non-pollution. So, and many cities are now also improving this active mobility through providing e-bikes or e-scooters, micro-mobility. Singapore has also implemented it, but it has the infrastructure was not in place properly. So because Singapore was aging population, so they have reduced the amount of micro-mobility. But various other cities, especially various European cities are doing it. So we need to think about it as well. And that is why it matters, because it brings social equity, economic opportunity for local businesses. It brings our carbon footprint down. And various cities are tapping into this by selling their carbon credits. Especially, I will share the case study of this. But still, after so much talk, there are challenges in terms of the political level, governance issue, in terms of the people level, like they don't feel safe because it is not connected, not designed properly. In terms of, still we are thinking about car first society. We need to think about people first society. So we need to change our mentality, and still people also think it's very hot. How come I will walk, or how come I will ride? So we need to change the perspective. If we will provide the infrastructure, people will use it. So if you will not use it, you will lose it. So we need to think in that terms as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Is it switched off? So how? If we will think in terms of the secluded, isolated planning, it will not work. We need to integrate it, NMT with public transport. So if we will think in terms of the integrated mobility hub, it will create a seamless connectivity, a seamless journey, and we need to think, provide multimodal hubs so that you can get down from your MRT station to take a cycle, go to your home or go to your office. So it is very useful. I will share some of the case study. As I mentioned, I will walk you through the Asia Pacific cities and what will be the best case study to start it, Singapore. Because I come also from, I'm Indian, but I live in Singapore. I'm living in Singapore and working very closely with Ministry of Transport as well, where they were not this way and in this planning structure since the beginning. Their long-term plan was placed, but still the infrastructure was still for motorized transport, especially focusing on public transport. But now they are seeing the value of it. So they have this vision of walk, cycle, and ride, and they're making it a way of life. So they have this plan, they have this long-term master plan, as well as the policies. Along with this Land Master Plan 2040, which has started its implementation. And they have this vision of you can cover your town by neighborhood area by 20-minute walk or cycle or ride, or by 40-minute whole city. Singapore is a small place, so in that case, you can cover it. Along with this, we have this concept of friendly street where you cannot move very fast your bike or your car, as well as a silver zone because we have the aging population also, young children to go to school. So we have connected this cycling network of around 725 kilometer around by this time, by this year, 2025, 2026. And we have this vision of connecting whole island by 2030, around creating 1,300 kilometer cycling and walking network. And this is really very pleasant. I use it every day for my running and for my walk. So it is a very pleasant and very good case study how we can adopt it, change people mentality, because Singapore is hot and humid. But when we provide the pedestrian walkway with sheltered cross and sheltered walkway, it is good to use. It's pleasant to use as well. Second example where it shows the government will to change it. It is from Seoul. I visited this place in person, and this is very beautiful where they dismantle whole 10-lane on the ground road space as well as a 4-lane elevated space to revitalize this stream, stream, to make it more public space. And it has not created just space for public, but it has improved the air quality and improved the ridership by 50%. So people started using public transport to come to this place. And it's really, believe me, it's really very beautiful to give back space to the people. So this is also shows that how we can improve it. Honzo is another example of when we integrate technology with public transport or non-motorized transport. Then it creates a great example. It is one of the world's largest city to integrate the cycling with digital platform where Didi, WeChat, or HelloRide or Mituan, they do integrate with work. So these are some of the examples where we can work with it. And these little red dot bikes are a great example. Bogota, they have started selling their carbon credits with the saving the carbon points and selling it. And they have one of the good public transport ride share where they use public transport as well as a walk and cycle. You can see the percentage and understand. So they have started integrating it. Delhi, they have the use. So if you cannot do it at the large scale, you can do it at a small scale. On Sundays, closing your street, showing the example, how can people use. They have this Ragiri system, which is from 2013, which is running. So we need to think about the space. We need to provide them a space, to provide a safe space, prioritize this access. I think Bram is going to share more on this, like how we can create the design of it, make it comfortable and enjoyable. And you can see the picture, how people are using it. So it needs a government backup. It needs an integration as well as it needs safety to make people safe and secure to use it. UITP is a great promoter of sustainable mobility and active mobility. We have a whole committee set up on active mobility. We call Land and Culture Committee, where we promote our members to use it. We have certain publications. It is open and it is in my library. We have around 60,000 publications on it. So I will close my presentation with this one word. To change the world, we change one at a time. We change one city at a time, and we need to think about active mobility because it is important, it is critical to think about it. So thank you. And if you have a question, I'm open to sharing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Purnima, for this enlightening presentation. We will continue our journey through non-motorized transport with Christopher Cost. Chris is a transport planner with 2 decades of experience advancing sustainable urban mobility. His expertise spans across bus rapid transit planning, public transport reform, complete street design, and land use transport integration. So please, Chris.
Great. Thanks so much, David, and thanks to ADB for organizing this dialogue on active mobility. So my colleague Bram and I have been working on a project with ADB to do fact-finding in different cities across Asia and Pacific, and look at ways that ADB can scale up active mobility. So I'm going to talk about some of our findings, and Brahm will also present some additional case studies. So if you look across the ADB urban mobility portfolio, we have quite a number of projects in the pipeline, ranging from BRT to e-buses, bus improvements, metro and commuter rail. And by my count, we have at least $9 billion of projects in the pipeline here. But for these projects to succeed, it's going to take a lot more than getting the rapid transit designs right. We have to have the broader urban transport ecosystem that really supports the use of public transport. And a key part of that is active mobility. Now, if we look at what's happening in our cities today, we have public transport station areas and university areas like this with no walkway at all. Oftentimes, they're unsafe crossings that put young people at risk. Narrow footpaths. This was our walk in Manila on Sunday. Very challenging. We didn't even have room for 2 people to cross. And then, we have streets without universal access, so that excludes people with disabilities from accessing public space in the city. Sometimes we build really nice walkways, but then we allow people to park their motorcycles and cars on them, and so it undermines the investment that we've made. And we sometimes install these kind of odd attempts to keep the vehicles off of the footpaths, but then it just ends up making it harder to walk at the end of the day. So what's this doing to our public transport? We've started to see this pattern of many rapid transit projects failing to attract ridership. And this is despite the massive investment that we're making in these systems. So we need to look seriously at how to turn this around and not just think about the rapid transit itself, but the broader infrastructure that can support it. So let's look at a few cities that have started to turn this around. Our first stop is Jakarta. It's a city with a massive public transport network, 250 kilometers of BRT, over 400 kilometers of commuter rail. There's a metro under construction, of which ADB is co-financing the east-west line. There's also LRT system that's growing. And the provincial government has made a strong attempt to integrate these modes, and through physical connections, through fare integration, through common wayfinding, and also to build the active mobility connections to improve the last mile. So one of the starting points in around 2016 to 2017 was getting the designs right, adopting uniform design standards that embed universal access from the start. The city was motivated by the Asian Games coming in 2018, and Governor Anis, who was there at the time, who came into office in 2017, really made a push to expand active mobility in the city alongside the growing public transport network. You can see one of the ongoing projects on Rasuna Said Street that goes alongside a BRT and LRT corridor and helps to improve access. So, what are the key elements? Covered walkways, so connecting commuter rail stations to bus stops and BRT. Consistent wayfinding, so you see these signs of, across the city explaining where you can get to the nearest metro or bus station, and wide pedestrian areas in these interchange locations. One of the most exciting things we saw was the redesign of the BRT stations on Sudirman with at-grade crossings. It used to be that you could only get to these stations with footbridges. It was a big hassle. And so now there are these at-grade crossings that make it much easier to access the system. Turning to cycling, there's a lot of good cycle parking, covered cycle parking at these interchange locations. But I think in Jakarta, when it comes to the on-road environment, we still have a lot of work to do. We have two, mostly painted lanes, and as you can see in this photo, they're not doing anything to help cyclists, right? It doesn't provide any safety benefit, and it's not helping to advance the cycling agenda. So a better example, also from Jakarta, is on Sudirman, on the main road, where the city did install some stretches with physical protection. And so this is the kind of infrastructure that we need to scale up in other parts of the city to really make it safe for people of all ages and abilities to cycle. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the car-free day. We saw this on Sunday when we were in town, and it was incredible. There are huge crowds, people of all ages and walks of life who come out for this. It's now a weekly car-free event that Jakarta holds. And I think this is a great thing that we could attempt in more of our cities. So second city is Pimpri-Chinchwad in the Indian state of Maharashtra. So you might think this is an unlikely candidate to be a leading city for walking and cycling, given that it's one of the hubs of automobile manufacturing in India. But I actually found that Pimpri is one of the leading cities in the country for building out the walking and cycling network. City has a large BRT network, and there's also an expanding metro network in the city. They started by focusing on the connectivity to the commuter rail that's there in the city. So around Akurdi station, connecting that station to nearby schools and colleges with these high quality walkways. And then the city moved to upgrading the walkways and building cycle tracks on most of the BRT corridors across the city. And you can see the good design, the attention to detail here. There's a lot of capacity building of contractors, of the engineers in the municipal corporation that went into creating this good design that, where all the elements are at the same level. There's a smooth surface for cycling, physical separation from the carriageway, and the preservation of the existing trees. Whoops. Also, additional last mile corridors providing better access to the BRT system. And the city is currently upgrading the main walkways along the metro corridor to provide better access to the stations, and also introducing cycle tracks there as well. Other key design elements, so the tabletop crossings to slow down vehicles and keep the walkway at the same level even through intersections and property entrances, preservation of existing trees again, and the extensive use of street furniture. So they're not just thinking of these as mobility corridors, but public spaces where you can see that there was a compound wall along this corridor. It may not have been the liveliest space, but now that there's furniture, people have a place to wait and interact on the street. Parking does remain a challenge. So there are a lot of the walkways that we saw that have serious parking encroachments, and oftentimes there's space right next to the footpath on the street. So city is currently working to create a parking policy and step up enforcement on the corridors. And a final project that's pretty interesting in Pimpri-Chinchwad is this Bharat Setu initiative, where the city is following an area-wide approach. So they're taking specific neighborhoods one by one and upgrading a complete network of walkways in the neighborhood to provide better access to educational institutions and public transport stops. The city has floated a green bond to help pay for this. It raised $22 million. It's the first green bond in India that's gone toward active mobility. And they were able to supplement this with funding from the national government for the Urban Challenge Fund in India. So finally, we'll look at Singapore. And I think this is another instructive case because it shows how even in a high-income country, the government's realized that it's key to improve active mobility links if you want to improve public transport ridership. And we saw LTA really putting a lot of emphasis on this, strengthening their own capacity. They told us they have more than 100 people just working on active mobility within the agency. So we need to see that kind of capacity in more of our cities to get this right. So key initiatives, the covered walkways, so already more than 186 kilometers of these covered walkways built. So LTA's goal is to do this within 200 meters of every bus stop in the city and 400 to 800 meters of every metro rail stop. Some of them even cross streets, they cross intersections. It's really quite an impressive network that they have that keeps you out of the rain and sun. Improved at-grade crossings. So here's another case where there's a footbridge, but people are obviously voting with their feet and prefer the at-grade crossing. So LTA has been improving the crossings, although there's still more to be done to optimize signal cycles for pedestrians. And in addition to that, developing these safe crossings in the neighborhoods. So the Friendly Streets program has been bringing tabletop crossings, signalized crossings to residential neighborhoods. They've already done it in 5 of the towns, and now it's expanding to 10 more. Parking enforcement, it was promising to see that LTA is also cracking down on motorcycles parked on the walkways and making sure that they're free of encroachment. Bicycle parking, so really impressive progress there with the 285,000 slots of public bicycle parking. And then the LTA has also required, and along with other agencies, have implemented building control rules that require all private developments to also include bicycle parking so that people have parking at both ends of their journey. The bike share system is there across the city with 2 operators supplying 55,000 bikes, and it's fairly inexpensive to use the system. And LTA has set an ambitious goal of expanding from the 795 kilometers of cycle paths that are there now to 1,300 kilometers of cycle tracks by 2030. And finally, it was really inspiring to see the integration between the on-street cycleways and the public open spaces. So thinking of the parks not just as endpoint destinations for recreation, but as throughways where you can cycle, you can walk to your final destination, and take that trip through a park. These parks also have lots of child-friendly spaces, many playgrounds, and they also extend into the built-up areas and integrate commercial space as well. Yeah, and the final point for Singapore is the strict attention to building design, so making sure that not only the public realm is pedestrian-friendly, but also private buildings provide 24-hour access to reduce walking distance. They have these kinds of cut-throughs that are weather protected, and also encourage new developments to have active facades to encourage livelier public space. So yeah, we have work to do. There are a lot of elements that we can start to incorporate when we're implementing public transport projects. Make sure that all the access routes have accessible tree-lined footpaths, safe crossings at grade instead of footbridges, making sure that we manage parking to keep the cars off of our walkways, make sure that buildings are designed with pedestrians in mind, integrate the parks and greenways, and finally use car-free events and other communications tools to build momentum. So thanks very much, and I look forward to collaborating with everyone to scale up active modes in our cities.
Thank you very much, Chris, for another very exciting presentation. We will end up this first part of our session with a last presentation with Bram van Ooyen, who is an urban transport consultant working on the planning, design, and implementation of sustainable urban transport projects worldwide. His key expertise lies with active mobility, non-motorized transport, and parking. So Bram, floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining. If you're going to remember one thing from my presentation, then let it be this. I live in Asia for the past 20 years, in China, in Guangzhou, but I travel all around the region. And what I see, and what you need to remember, is that many cities in the region are implementing incredible projects for active mobility. And they're doing it at a high quality and an increasing scale. So active mobility does work, and it can be done everywhere. And I will talk today about the World Bank's Tianjin project, Vientiane's and Shening-Chubi projects that are ADB, and then I identify a few more opportunities. I hope to inspire you that investing in active mobility can really work. So we first look at Tianjin. This is the World Bank's largest project focused only on active mobility. $145 million were spent on this project. It opened in 2022, and it took about 7 years. There was no land acquisition. The outcome was extremely successful, and it has won many awards. But when the project started, the city of Tianjin, which is near Beijing, is the 5th largest in China, at the time 15 million people. It was experiencing the same problems that every city has. Rising motorization, urban sprawl, congestion, and decreasing urban livability. The city had built 4 metro lines, but they had under 1 million daily passengers, which for a big city like Tianjin is very little, under 1 million. But at the same time, they were going to invest in 13 metro lines. So there was a problem with there was something wrong with their access to stations. The very same points that my colleagues earlier have mentioned. Because 76% or 67% of metro passengers got to the station on foot. And what was it? Something like 6% got there on bicycle. But many of the footpaths were less than 3 meters. And many people complained that this was a major problem for walking in the city. So when this project was originally started, it was started not as an active mobility project, but rather as a bus rapid transit corridor. But as the city went into negotiations for the loan, the city decided to implement many more metro lines, and maybe they were going to move away from the concept of BRT. So they suggested to the World Bank to make it a road rehabilitation project, to just resurface all the streets in the city for cars. The World Bank officers said, no, this is public transport, sustainable urban transport, that's never going to happen. And the project officer of the World Bank was the one that convinced the mayor to change it into a project where active mobility was the core of the project, improving walking and cycling in the city center towards metro stations, and that, yeah, the upgrades of roads was part of that, but it was going to be an active mobility project. He changed that. In the meantime, Tianjin also had new policies where they wanted to become one of the most environmentally sustainable cities in China, where they wanted to make transport greener and cleaner. And also, importantly, they wanted to build a city where people want to live. Talented people don't want to live in a dump, in a shithole city. Investing in public transport, in walking and cycling, creates an environment where people want to live and where your talent will come. If your talent needs to spend 2 days every day going to and from work, they won't live there. Yeah, and then the goal to improve public transport access. Okay, so the project was split up in 5 components. Walking and biking improvements in the city center on these orange lines, improved access on these on roads connecting to 96 metro stations in purple line. They had a bike share system that they wanted to build, but at the same time, the rise of private dockless bike share in China came up, so they had to, or they could cancel that because it was already taken care of. They built a bus terminal and they added some TAs to support the project. So what did they build? 189 urban streets over 132 kilometers were improved for walking and cycling, including commercial pedestrian streets that helped the local economy. Some streets were not fully closed off to cars, but were built such that the footpath is still functioning. Before, there used to be cars parked there. Now it's fully available for walking, and cobblestone streets helped reduce traffic and traffic speeds. They built 126 kilometers of bike lanes and many bike parking racks. The sidewalks and bike lanes close to the metro stations were widened so that people can access the stations easily. 38 public parks, including many popular parks where kids and families spent their weekends. They built a lot of trees along the footpaths to provide shade and shelter from sun and rain. Street lights, public seating, garbage bins, traffic lights, drainage. All of this was part of this project. Along with that, there were some TAs, an urban transport development strategy that was published in 2018 that includes TOD, BRT, rail bus integration, a parking management study, something that was missing in Pimpri Chinswat, right? That was included here. A project to document the impacts that I'm presenting today, and a cool app where citizens can provide inputs into the project, where they can say what issues they have and where improvements should be made. More than 500,000 suggestions were made. Some of the corridors were selected based on people's inputs. And following this project, another 70 streetscape improvements were made based on inputs from citizens on this app. And it now runs in many more cities. But if you want to do this, parking is still an issue. The traffic police was not so excited about this. Some of the bike lanes are parked on by cars, the same problem. And at intersections, some improvements should be made for provisions at the intersection. The results provided by the World Bank, 175,000 more people using the metro, 260,000 more people walking and cycling, and the total share of them is 71%, which is pretty good. But what is most astonishing is the economic return of this project at 53%, which is incredibly high. This project spurred huge investments, way better than typical road projects would do. Also, they found out in the studies that if you widen the footpaths and if you increase the number of pedestrian crossings, your number of people walking and therefore the rents of the shops and restaurants along that street will go up. So investing in it is also good for that reasons. There were a lot of safety benefits, fewer accidents, and climate resilience improvements. And for the mayor, it gave him the recognition on the world stage. They won in 2024 the prestigious Sustainable Transport Award. So that's nice for them as well, and many national Chinese prizes as well. When the project finished, the city wasn't done. So much capacity had been built that the city has continued ever since to build even better projects. A sports stadium that is turned into now a public space that's open 24/7. Many pedestrian and bike bridges, more pedestrian streets, more cultural tourist zones that are pedestrianized, and complete streets with better design than this project even. When speaking to the people that run the project, the key factors why this project was successful is that the project officers demanded quality work and the right kind of project from the Tianjin government. The vice mayor took a while, but once convinced, he took this on himself as well. He led bi-weekly meetings with all the parties involved. He was on it all the time to ensure project delivery. The consultants, the designers, they were from Tianjin. They had to be trained as well, but they got pretty good. And the advantage of having the consultants there in the city is that they have the contacts and they can always, at any minute, jump in to sort out issues. If you have consultants from outside, more difficult. And World Bank supported the project throughout with expertise from their management and experts that constantly reviewed designs and progress. So the lessons in the completion report, and I really like them, and it's amazing to see a development bank saying this in their reports. You don't need another pilot, okay? You need to think with an active mobility mega project mindset. The benefits, economic benefits, are obvious. They're better than any other investment. So really fully embrace sustainable transport, get the government on board, get leadership, and take a holistic approach. It's more than infrastructure building. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. That was the World Bank. ADB is doing some good things too, David. Almost finished is the Vientiane Sustainable Urban Transport Project that soon there will be buses running here on this street that used to be full of parked cars. But now at least the bollards provide car-free footpaths and people can cross the street anywhere. On some of the side streets, complete streets were built where everyone can walk. There is space to drive and a little bit to park, but people can walk anywhere, people can cross anywhere, there's space for vendors. It's really just an upgrade to the entire street. Many streets actually turn into food night markets, which is pretty cool, so sort of pedestrianized. And then the second project in Xianing, in Chebi particular, this was a drainage project, or is a drainage project. A detailed design will start soon, so I'm showing concepts now, but I want to show that ADB is doing good things. A drainage project where the idea of the project officer is, if we're going to dig up all the roads, then we might as well build back better streets, right? So anyone working in drainage, there's no excuse not to incorporate walking and cycling into your projects because you're going to rebuild the streets anyway. So greenways, improved access and connectivity are part of it, traffic calming, road safety, 3-star IRAP for all road users, including pedestrians and cyclists, and a zero emission zone in the city center. My favorite project of this is this aqueduct that brings fresh water from the mountains, and this ugly structure is now running through the city. That's what it's going to look like, with a elevated walkway for pedestrians with a glass floor where you can see the water. And on ground level, you still have bike lanes, you have walkways, you have pedestrian facilities, public plazas. This will become the postcard project for the city. This will attract not only locals, but also tourists and visitors. Yeah, and I want to take 2 minutes, if I may. One, okay. So I showed a lot of different examples, and Chris as well, on what kind of active mobility projects we can invest in. But I want to show a few more. Climate resilient streets, bioswales drainage, you know, if you're building those, build footpaths with them. River and seaside promenades. All these photos, all these examples are in Asia and the Pacific. Yeah? Greenways and linear parks can provide corridors for people to walk and cycle, recreation and tourism as well. Pedestrian and bike bridges are all part of this. Kids' playgrounds are incredibly popular in China here and in Dushanbe. School streets, whoever builds schools at ADB, think about the streets that are near them, you know, improve those. Spaces to rest, meet and play. People working in the urban revitalization, if you're looking at industry revitalization, think of cultural parks, rails to trails, make those part of the projects. Low emission zones are a reason to start investing in these. And people working in rural roads, for the urban sections of them, make sure that they provide footpaths, traffic calming, crossings. You also, working in rural roads, should be investing in active mobility. Okay, so again, it's happening in Asia already, active mobility. But with multi-development, with MDBs, including ADB, the size and the scale is still very limited. Cities are implementing this, so I think everyone should get on board and start investing more in these kind of projects. I hope with my presentation I gave you a lot of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bram, for those very inspiring examples. I get from this last presentation that basically when there is a will, there is a way. It's really all about mindset and political will. I think civil society has a big role to play to push their political leaders in going in this direction and in promoting this type of projects, because they would be, in any case, the main beneficiary of such investments. And I think it doesn't take so much efforts. It can happen rather fast. I remember in the city where I'm coming from, Paris, when I was a child, I could still remember in the main inner courtyard of the Louvre, which is a huge museum in the center of Paris, it was a parking lot when I was a child. At the exact space where the pyramid stands today, which is the main entrance of the museum, it used to be a parking lot. And now, after 10 years later, a bit more, it's the whole city has been completely transformed through this type of measures, through introduction of bicycle sharing system, bicycle lanes, better sidewalks, better and non-motorized transport infrastructure. It took about 20 years, but it can really happen if there is the right push from the civil society and the right political will behind. So after these 4 presentations, we will have a Q&A session now. I will leave the floor to the audience. If you have a few questions, please feel free to jump in. And we will circulate a mic. Over there.
Thank you. Jeff Turner, consultant to ADB in the Poverty and Social Analysis team, who are involved in analysing the poverty and social impacts of all ADB projects. But I'm a transport specialist and I'm visiting professor at the University of Leeds Institute for Transport Studies. And this question of scaling up and building out from somewhere does raise the question, are we maybe looking at this from the wrong end of the telescope or the wrong end of the map? If you look at where the high numbers of walking and the high numbers of active travel already exists across Asian cities, do we not need to be thinking of starting from the areas of low-income communities, peripheral neighbourhoods, informal settlements, where already, not only already is there high levels of active travel, but there are levels of mode share that you're trying to maintain rather than trying to generate. And is there not a case of actually we're starting from the periphery and then the outskirts into the centre than perhaps some of the images we've seen, which is sort of starting from the centre, and eventually maybe we'll make it out to the periphery and the lower income communities. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you for your question. We should meet later and talk more about this. Many of the active mobility projects are financed with the idea of connecting to public transport. With that rationale, the periphery often is less connected to public transport and therefore receives less attention in terms of investment. It's probably not a good thing, not a just thing, but that's the reality of how projects are currently shaped. But I would love to continue the conversation later to see what we can do about that. And I would love to see also how ADB and others value active mobility. Because in the end, it's a bank, right? It's numbers. Does it make economic sense? And I wonder if the bank is currently valuating active mobility benefits for what they really are. Yeah.
Maybe, may I? And does it work? Yeah. Okay. I think the relation between the periphery and the city, the core city, is very interesting, but also very complex, because, of course, if you want to connect the periphery and the core center through bicycle other pathway, you have to cross a lot of barriers, because you have those rail, water, and highway infrastructure. That's why it's not that easy. That looking for synergy with another mode of transport, I think. It makes a lot of sense, I think, to have in our head that while doing an infrastructure, perhaps we should head the bicycle and walking. I think the synergy are really important if we want to cross all those barriers.
Yeah, and what I just wanted to add quickly is that there are also more opportunities for the kind of build back better synergy that Bram was talking about. So for instance, if we're doing, climate resilience and drainage projects in informal settlements, then we should get the surface level infrastructure right. And so I think there's definitely a need for coordination with the urban section of ADB. And the other point I'd make is that even low-income people need to travel to the city center for work in many cases. And so it's not that you're only benefiting rich people who live in the city center, but you're benefiting everyone who needs to travel to those parts of the city to access opportunities.
My name is Ashar. I've been from Pakistan, and I've been working with ADB for past many years. Taking what Bram actually finished with, like you see, ADB is in a bank, and it still can see advantages of investment into the public transport infrastructure or into the NMTs, correct? The thing is that if ADB as a bank can see a potential, a financial potential, investing in these projects, how can ADB or certain donor agencies convince the governments in the developing countries to see exactly the same way? And what is your experience like? You see, we have been working together for many of the countries, correct? What should be the starting point? Because I guess you see, you have the delegates who have immense experience, and they must have actually gone through harder times convincing the government and the political people to get convinced about investing into the walking infrastructure. So you see, there are certain things that we need to learn, how ADB sees it, and how can we actually convince our politicians to see it the same way? And what is your experience coming all the way and implementing such things in such good countries?
Oh, okay, Purnima.
Actually, It's very good question. We at a UITP working with different ministries as well as our operators, we face this challenge. ADB is also our partner, so we work very closely with ADB as well. We understand that convincing government is sometimes tough, but this is the time when it is not a question of whether we should think about active mobility or cities cannot think about active mobility now. It is a question that whether we cannot afford to think about. We need to, it is a time when we need to think about and we should integrate it. So first, to convince these politicians or government what our members or what we do as an advocacy also, we back these things with the data and with the evidence. If politicians or the decision makers see the data of the benefit, like how it is benefiting it, the kind of example Bram and Chris has given, how the cities are doing it with improving the infrastructure, and it is improving the overall ride share of public transport, ridership, as well as it is creating a buzz. It is improving your tourism as well. So if we will back with the data and the evidence, how other cities like Tianjin, Taipei has a high percentage of walking and cycling, around 7 to 12% people every day walk and cycle. Or like Singapore, you will say that we cannot take the example of Singapore being a developed cities, but being a developed city where public transport is so efficient, still Singapore has started thinking about it. So they have seen these data and the evidences that cities are benefiting it. So they have started consulting with the people on the grassroots level or the civil society or people who are using it, how we can provide you better infrastructure, what is your concern, how you will walk and cycle, because we need to always think about future as well. So if we will provide these informations, integrate it well, even if we can provide a small at the pilot project level and then scale it at a bigger scale, politician will agree. And ADB coming up with this benefit of thinking that yes, now we can fund even these kinds of projects, it shows that the willingness to accept. So I think it is our time as a planner, as a decisions maker, supporting government to promote this and take this step. Yeah.
Maybe a last question from the audience?
Hello.
If the mic can be given.
I have a question. Sorry. Good afternoon.
Okay.
I'm George Boyd from with the Move Up One coalition. So first, I want to thank the panel for presenting this one, because since I think yesterday everything is like car centric, and now this is for more people centric. So thank you. And I just want to ask, how can, like, maybe we have seen this from other countries and from the Philippines. I think some of you have been living here for a few days now and a few weeks now, so you know what's our situation. So how can you convince our maybe government or our LGU? So how can you convince, because we can easily convince the stakeholders, the communities, regarding being bicycle friendly and walkability, but our problem now is how can you convince, even with all this data, how can you convince our politicians here to be more people centric, for more about non-motorized transport? So how can you help them to synchronize active mobility with the current transport system? Thank you.
Yeah, the point I'd like to make is that it's not only about convincing the top officials. I think we also have to do our homework so that when a political window of opportunity opens, we're ready to take advantage of it, right? And so the Jakarta story really illustrates that. So there was a lot of work that local advocates did in developing the design standards, preparing sample designs for street improvements, building capacity within the government, building capacity of contractors to be able to implement the infrastructure the right way, and thinking about potential funding sources so that when a progressive governor got into office, they were ready to rip from day one, right? So I think even if you're struggling right at the moment, like maybe there's someone who's not quite sympathetic, do your homework now, so that when you do get that opportunity, you're ready to move.
And a great example of that is the ETSA carousel. COVID happened, and all of a sudden the bus lane was possible, and the bus lane never went away. So, example from Manila, yeah.
I think the discussion is all over the world the same. I think it's how to convince, but there are really examples like Paris. If you see the quality of the air now, it really changed also. And of course, all you mentioned it, the local economy is stimulated also. But I think the most important, I think it's maybe to have a kind of a starting point, and that's why somebody mentioned the Asian game or a kind of event that maybe could be the goal that you want to reach and that you want to use to improve your city, and then use it again as a synergy to develop the active mobility. And maybe my last recommendation is also to maybe work temporarily, win what you can and just keep it and then go further.
Thank you very much. We will end now the Q&A session, and we will move on with the second part of our session, which is a moderated discussion. I will now invite on stage 3 more panelists. Miss Carly Gilbert-Patrick from Slocat. Mr. Joshua Joseph Rodriguez from the Department of Transport of the Philippines. And Clément Musil from Mobilize Your City. So maybe to start this discussion, I would like to ask you a first question. According to you, what are the key enablers to ensure meaningful inclusion of non-motorized transport in larger urban transport projects?
Okay, I know I've probably got 2 minutes, and I need to use my first minute to find out who I'm talking to. I can't talk to a room and I have no idea who they are. So if you're with the bank or a financial organization or another bank, could you stand up for me? I just want to see who's in the room from a bank. Okay, we know where the money is, guys. Thank you. And what about advocacy and NGOs and civil society? If you're an advocate, non-government, could you stand up or put your hand up? Well done, guys. Okay, academia, researchers, hands up or stand up. Okay, who am I missing? Who's everyone else? Where are you from? Government. Okay, government, stand up or hands up. Okay, great. Thank you. That's 1 minute. Now I know who I'm talking to. Okay, so I think for me, the biggest thing is sometimes we forget that we are talking to banks. And you mentioned this, like they're not here to, you guys are not here, banks are not here really to save the world. They're here to give out loans and grants, and they need to know that the money's going to be, it can be recouped, that it's economically viable and sustainable. So I think we need to think about walking and cycling a bit like drainage. We can talk about health benefits and looking after the poorest and access, but really from with regards to accessing funding, we need to think about it as an enabler of ridership, for example. I think, Chris, you talked about this. It's about how walking and cycling as part of bigger public transport projects unlocks extra business case assessment from that project. So for me, the real big way of unlocking it is, and I used to be really, I've been working in walking and cycling for 15 years, and I used to be really romantic, thinking if we just explained why it's so important that people who are already walking and cycling all over the world, why we should keep them safe, that would be enough. And we've been doing it, and it's not. Even though we have amazing examples, only 1% of global development funds in transport go to walking and cycling projects, at most. And that's if we're being generous. And you have to dig them out of road safety projects and drainage projects. There's hardly any that are just at scale mass walking and cycling investment. So I think we really just have to connect it to bigger transport projects?
Hello. Okay. For me, I would like to speak in the context of the Philippines. So, of course, I will not be talking about convincing the government anymore because I'm from the government. And actually, we're really convinced that we really need this. We have a dedicated office from our department that works on active mobility, and they are doing a fantastic job. But one thing is one other entity that I want to be involved and I think would greatly push the thrust forward is the private sector. We're big on malls here in the Philippines, and if malls here in the Philippines and other private establishments see to it that in their design they incorporate end of trip facilities and shower area, those can encourage a lot of people to shift from using their cars to using their non-motorized transport modes, because at the end of the day you save a lot of money and you save a lot of stress by using your NMT. But the question is, when you use it from your house to your destination, is there any facilities there you can use to support you in doing it? You don't want to be all sweaty and disheveled when you go to the office and not have anything to change up on. So that's one thing, and I think that can address our short-term needs. Of course, as I mentioned, I will not mention more on the government side because we're really convinced we have to do this. But we believe that for government involves a lot of things, that is securing the funding and getting a lot of the local governments involved. But right now, what we can do is to tap on the resources that are available from the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Clément?
So thank you very much also for having me on this panel. So first of all, I just want to say from where I'm speaking, because today I represent Mobilize Your City, that is a partnership, a global partnership funded by EU, European Union, but also French government, German government. And this partnership is promoting sustainable urban mobility. David, you introduced this panel with like this story, like we are all pedestrian, we are, all walking and all that. What Mobilize Your City is promoting is basically sustainable urban mobility plan. I know in the room there is like some people who did like some SUMPs already, Pakistan, PNG. And what is like very interesting with those SUMP is to reveal the hidden part about the mobility, that is the walk. And so what I'm saying here, it is that in order to initiate dialogue with governments, with stakeholders and all that, it's to have data. And those SUMP are providing the data. So a clear picture of what is happening in the city at different scale. And then it reveals this hidden part that is walking. And from that, it's possible to build up some project, to plan some project. And then I'm also promoting then the Mobilize Your City. We are also promoting some project in order to dedicate for NMT active mobility for different cities who are member of Mobilize Your City. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second question is more a question for myself, actually, because I've been trying for more than 20 years and most of the time failed miserably. So I'm going to ask you this question. How can ADB expand its support for non-motorized transport beyond the traditional large-scale transport infrastructure projects?
So I think one of the things that ADB and other banks have that's like real value add is this network of countries that they're supporting. And so with SLOCAT, the organization I'm now Secretary General for, we do a lot of work in the global spaces like the COP processes and the SDG processes, but often the transport decision makers are not in those spaces. Where they are is in the regional spaces, learning from each other. And I think, for example, that almost last slide that Bram showed with like the cost benefit assessment of the investment just shows actually what the numbers are. And that sort of best practice, that sort of case study, that business case, I think something that ADB could do, and the World Bank and other banks, is package that and share it with their network of country. And I think when you start to see that regional momentum, it can be really powerful. So in Africa, for example, and Chris will know this, we've been working in a lot of countries, really trying year after year to support, and we have pilots and we have good examples, but now there's a Pan-African action plan for active mobility that's been approved by the African Union, and now there's this sort of regional commitment and momentum. So I think outside of the big projects, it's also remembering that the bank provides technical assistance and using that network and that power and that access to kind of showcase best practice to the region.
Thanks, Carly. That's good. Agreed. There's a lot of answers to your question, but I think boil it down. One, I showed many examples of how active mobility can be added onto projects that ADB is already doing. It's hard to convince governments, hard to get financing, it's a pain to get all the safeguards through. All of those are already done. And it takes a very little bit extra to improve active mobility. So get all the people at transport, urban, schools, terrific city development, like slum redevelopment, all of those. Let's find ways and help the project officers to incorporating these kind of projects in it. That's one. And the second of many others, but the second is make it cool. In my presentation, I showed a few examples of projects which are the postcard projects for those cities. There are many projects that can be funded if they're big enough. If the mayor finds it cool because he went to Bangkok and he saw that and he wants that. He went to Amsterdam and he saw that and he wants that. Show that ADB is doing this, can support, wants to support, to make it cool. And then when you have these cool examples, show them to everyone. When you walk into the resident mission in Phnom Penh, in Port Moresby, in Tbilisi, you see a picture of that cool project that ADB did in some city that is an active mobility project. Own it. Do it and own it and tell everyone about it.
Actually, I will just add one point, how to make it cool. We can make it cool by talking to the people who are going to use it, who are there to use that vicinity. If you will talk to them, even if you will go to school and talk to school kids, they will give you hundreds of ideas because they are the one who are going to use it. So use those ideas, because they come from the imagination. Use those ideas, implement it, think about it, because you are going to invest your money, whether it is a small chunk of money. But if it is funded by, like if we will sort out funding, if we will sort out the government willingness, then comes how we will bring community to it and how we will integrate with various agencies so that agencies will have also ownership of it. The users will have a ownership of it. The businesses have the ownership of it. And then it makes cool. And it will bring more people, more tourism. People will come. That is how people will come to Singapore to see these places. This is the technique Singapore has realized it and started making it cool. So yeah, that's it.
Some more ideas for me, please?
Quick idea is to have a monthly car-free day for ADB staff, starting with the president, who would take public transport, walk or cycle to the ADB office, and maybe even do this with the government and scale it up to an activity that both government and ADB could do together.
So again, speaking from the government side, and this will be an ask from me to the ADB, as you conduct an annual transport summit, which includes rail and road, probably shift the focus to active mobility or non-motorized, so that the non-motorized mobility can be promoted. The good thing about the car industry is good at promoting their products. So there's no shortage of cars everywhere, even buses and other motorized vehicle. But have you seen any commercial involving bicycles? I doubt it. So probably you can organize this sort of a seminar, symposium, or probably a week-long seminar for us to catch up on the latest on how to design more, NMT-friendly cities. I think we lack all of those things. And the majority of the people I have worked with LGU and the DPWH are all young people who are also using non-motorized transport. They don't need convincing anymore because they are convinced that it's going to work. But how about the others that are doesn't really know how to use their bikes and doesn't know where is it safe to use their bike? So probably you can organize that on an annual or semi-annual basis. Thank you.
Thank you. That reminds me of the newly elected mayor of Paris that was elected just a few weeks ago. And the first thing he's done after his victory was proclaimed is he just took his bike and went on a tour in the city of Paris, and it was all over the news and all over the media. So I hope our president one day will do the same thing.
I think in the active mobility, the coalition, they are less obvious than in other type of transport, I would say. And I think it's to bring them together, the schools, the figure that will maybe drive the transformation. And in my case, I work a lot with insurance companies because they are from the private sector, but they have really an interest in improving the active mobility, not only for the health benefits, but also for the injuries that are really high, of course, when you don't have a good infrastructure. And they are a really good partner, I have to say.
Any more ideas?
Some like feedback and experience. So in my work and my job, sometimes we are doing like study tours and all that in order to convince people. And so from different delegation, different country. And what I like, especially when we go to Paris or to France, is to bring everyone to move by public transport, to go to the ticket machine, to try the ticket machine, to experience that. So to experience from A to B to C. I mean, the intermodality, interchange, to experience signage and all that, and all that to see. Look, we are all doing that without taking like the car, without taking anything, and it's safe. It's easy, to go from A to B, and yeah, it's that to experience this kind of high quality environment.
Yeah, in ADB we do a lot of those study tours, and I'm a strong proponent of this because it's true that just to expose the leadership to other type of experience, other type of mobility can really change sometimes their mindset. Maybe another question. I was listening to this presentation regarding Tianjin and quite impressed by the strong political decision that was made by the mayor at the time to really focus this investment on active mobility and come up with such a large investment project at the citywide scale. In ADB, we are not too bad at the moment in linking up active mobility projects with large mass transit projects. Most of the time when we develop metros or when we develop BRTs, we also try to redevelop the entire corridor from one facade to another facade, retrofitting bicycle lanes, proper sidewalks along those corridors. But the problem is they're most of the time restricted to that specific corridor and doesn't expand beyond in the city. So Tianjin example was quite impressive. So the question is really, how can we scale up this type of project, quality non-motorized transport projects, and accessibility at the citywide scale?
This came up yesterday as well in the UN Decade plenary that if we don't count it, then it doesn't count, right? And I think as much as I'm the first one to say banks are banks and they want to lend out and give grants and it's all money and economic business case, there is also the side of things that the banks have to look internally at how they assess projects and look at the criteria they're using. Just like many years ago, there were maybe no road safety criteria, so you could have massive highways. And now that there are safety criteria in the project assessment methodologies, you have to consider road safety. And I think it needs to get to the point where it's the same for walking and cycling and access and how you're linking up communities. And there are ways, and you know, Bram showed that, how we can turn that into economic numbers. But unless it's integrated into the project assessment methodologies, then it will never become mandatory. And I know World Bank, for example, now have this active mobility project assessment tool. It's still in its early stages and it's not mandatory, but it means that bank country managers, when they're considering projects, they can plug that in and use it to assess the additional benefits of including walking and cycling investment. And I think that's maybe one thing that's a bit of a bigger ask, but to start thinking, for the bank to start thinking about, as we've definitely seen that, you know, most of my country support has been in Africa. We've definitely seen that when the governments themselves and the banks start including walking and cycling considerations into assessments of which projects they choose and don't choose, you start seeing more investment in walking and cycling.
To go back to Tianjin, because your question started with Tianjin. Their idea was to move away from a BRT to road rehabilitation. That's the wrong direction. It really took one project officer based in Beijing to spend his weekends in Tianjin and walk around, get to know the city, see public transport is not used much, talk to the vice mayor, meet up, have a chat. The vice mayor was like, no, roads, roads, roads. He was like, no roads. Took a lot of convincing. It were bright people at the bank that also had the time and the capacity to do this, but to keep convincing the client. Many clients are not ready for it yet. You, David, are a shining light in the ADB doing this. That's why you're hosting the session. We would like to inspire other ADB officers to, also start considering this. That's the first point I'll make. The role of the project officers is incredibly important, and they need to believe in it. And we are here to help to convince more of them to believe in it. The second is, you need to mainstream it. If you can if active mobility becomes standard part of ADB projects, even in cities where the government hasn't really thought about it, they also don't really care. But if you build back better footpaths after you do drainage, that's not hard to do. Get that done, do it right to make sure that people enjoy it, like it, and then it will get noticed. People will start experiencing that road to be much better than other roads. Then it becomes seen. It's sort of a pilot project in that way, in that sense. And then from there you can start growing it, and possibly the government will get on board to mainstream this kind of thinking and this kind of design, and it can grow from there. But the bank's ability is only one part. The civil society, the local organizations that are there, many of you in the room here from Manila, you are the ones that need to keep the pressure on to ADB, but mostly to your governments as well, and find the right moment to strike. But step by step and project by project, the momentum is growing. Many examples mentioned. It started small. Even the Netherlands, we were terrible in the 70s. Now we're the gold standard. Cities start small and it starts spreading. And ADB has an important role in this. But all of us in the room from our respective fields, we all have a role to play. So, yeah. In some cities, maybe. It depends. In China, no, you don't need that anymore. But in other cities, maybe, yeah.
So David, just to add to what Bram's saying about finding the moment, I think ADB needs to take up these discussions at a higher level politically, because in the cities where we've seen the citywide scale up happen, it's because a commissioner or a governor or a prime minister really got it. Somewhat like a leader who's into cycling or realizes the importance of changing the face of the city. So yeah, I think figuring out how we can broker those high level discussions and getting it onto the agenda, when we're setting the country strategies, when we're so instead of proposing an elevated highway, propose a walking and cycling transformation citywide, and that could really start to to get these projects on the table when there are receptive officials on the other side.
If I may, being the face of the government now, unfortunately, in this panel, I feel compelled to speak up. It's not that the government is not prioritizing this. Obviously, there are a lot of things in the pipeline that needs to get done. And I echo the statement previously that we need to make this a non-negotiable in terms of ADB's requirement. There is an ISIA for ADB. Why not make this also a requirement under ADB loan agreement so that we can have it? For working in the government, I realized that if you want to get things done, you need to make it mandatory. Otherwise, it will be shelved and be revisited later. That's the favorite line of maybe government entities now. It's to revisit it later. So just make it a point that they could not resist it and not put it on a later date. Make it really mandatory in terms of your evaluation, and and you'll see it will shoot up in terms of getting intertwined within the plan. So for example, you will grant a funding for a rail project, make it a requirement that it should have at least 40% connection to bike lanes or end of trip facilities. That will boost your connectivity using NMT to your projects. So that's it.
But not to be only on the critical side, I must praise some of the recent initiatives by the government. I can see that along ETSA, you're rebuilding footpath and proper footpath. So I think this will be a very good add-on to the city.
Yeah, I think in the project I manage in Dakar or Lüleburgaz, what I see is that we need a lot of capacity building, but local capacity building. That we have a team of very motivated civil servants within the administration that are there, and that also know so well the context, the local context, that they use simple tricks sometimes to change the situation, like improving crossings. Sometimes it's really small matter, but you have to understand very well the local condition, and that's why I would advise this local capacity building is very important for me.
Yeah, I think capacity building is very important. It was mentioned by a lot of you. Just reflecting upon what we're doing at the moment, we are working on a large BRT projects in Karachi, in Pakistan. One of the civil works contract was recently terminated due to many reasons. And the discussion we had with the government to restructure that particular contract is to actually externalize all the non-motorized transport facilities and to give it to specialized contractors. And we're going to try to also build the capacity of that contractor once the contract has been signed, to try to make sure that they come up with the proper standards for this particular infrastructure that can be replicated to other parts of the city. So, and Bram is helping us with that. So let's hope we can make it happen. We have just a few more minutes left. Maybe the last question is mostly, everything we're discussing right now is about really road sharing, right? How do we share the road space available within a particular city between different usage? And I guess one of the critical questions is really enforcement, because even if you build those facilities, and we've seen some of the photos in some of the presentations where you actually had proper sidewalks or proper bicycle lanes, but you had cars that were literally parked on top of it and not respecting their usage. So maybe a question for you. How do we work on this enforcement issue, and how do we convince the government to make it happen?
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, this is a constant challenge, and I think the big issue is that road space is contested endlessly, and it doesn't go away 5 years, 10 years, 15 years after you implement the project. It's an ongoing challenge, and I think going back to local capacity, that's the number one critical thing that we need to establish, because when that pressure comes, it could be in 10 years, it could be in 20 years, to roll back those improvements and take the space back for cars. There has to be a local constituency that's ready to push to maintain the active mobility and public transport space on the road. So I think collectively we need to do whatever we can to empower local stakeholders, which could be at universities, the NGO community, elsewhere in the city, to be ready to take up those debates when they come.
That's important. The simple solution is better design. As Chris showed in his presentation, 2 bike lanes in Jakarta, one unprotected, full of cars, motorbikes, one protected, only bikes. So sometimes simple measures, and those are the problems in Tianjin as well. Many are unprotected, and that's a very simple solution.
A bit of advice that we're trying to follow, and I leave everyone with, is as transport professionals, we need to speak to everyone else who's not a transport professional, and that's enforcement, but it's also hospitals and it's schools. And I think even for like national governments and city governments going to Treasury, with your health counterparts and with your education and tourism counterparts, you're more likely to convince Treasury to give you that share when there's, they're not trying to decide between different departments. Unnamed city, unnamed country, unnamed region, there was a hospital that had to basically, when the patients were leaving, 3 out of 10 patients were going back in because they were getting knocked over by a car or a motorbike. And it was actually in the end the hospital that got the funds to get the sidewalks and the crossings built. So, just working together, whether it's for enforcement or any other reason.
We need to educate. So education is another angle where we need to educate government employees who are taking part of it, as well as the people both. Because we need to change the mindset also, how to use these spaces. Because otherwise, if you will provide it in long term, it will be overtaken by the motorized transport, or it is unused for blocking the roads. So education comes also. And then what Kelly mentioned, coordination between the various agencies, so that we work very well in various aspects. In terms of the maintenance also, we build the road for pedestrian and cyclists, but what about the maintenance? After 5 years, the condition is dilapidated. So we need to continuous maintenance also is an issue. So we need to think about it, allocate fund for it. So I just wanted to add these 2 points. There is a need for coordination as well as education to the people, to the agencies both. Yeah.
For the DOTR, we are veering away from shared bike lanes to a dedicated bike lanes. As mentioned, if you don't allow other vehicles to use it, then they will not use it. So just remove the temptation from the devil, they will not be they will be out of there. But another thing that is going to work on the onset now is for people to be more vigilant in reporting those violators. In the Philippines, what is more scary is not the enforcers, but the social media. Once you get to social media, you will be bashed left and right. So I think people who are parking their vehicles, if they get posted in social media, they will think twice of doing it. So that is a band-aid approach. But for the government, we're trying to design a more rigid and dedicated bike lane so that only bikes and non-motorized vehicle can use.
From my side, I think I can say that it's a question of mindset, that where are the priority? And I think the priority are the weakest, and that's out in the Netherlands, the pyramid is organized, and that's the pedestrian, the bicycle, the public transport, and then the car. And I think you can have this priority expressed in the space, even really extremely, like in Zurich now, the recommendation as to design the street from the facade and make place for the pedestrian, the bicycle, and what is left over is for the car. It's a very different mindset. And I think that must be also in the way we maintain and in the way we control the infrastructure, there must be the same mindset also.
Thank you very much. I think we're coming to an end for this session. So big round of applause for our speakers and our panelists. Thanks again for attending this session. I personally got a lot of very inspiring ideas from the different presentations. I hope the same for you. It was the same for you. So thank you again, and see you in other sessions. Thank you very much.